And I'd like to welcome everyone for joining our program this afternoon, Waterwise Gardening Basics for the Sacramento area. I have Julie with me this afternoon as usual. We're the team here in this area to provide you with Our Water, Our World education about less toxic pest management and also, well, today, Waterwise gardening. Julie Barber is pretty awesome. If you're not familiar with her already, she is an Our Water, Our World qualified IPM advocate, a UC Master Gardener and Master Composter, and a longtime nursery professional throughout the greater Sacramento area. Julie has taught and presented to groups through webinars, seminars, classes, videos, and is the Ask the IPM expert source for cities throughout the area. So I am just thrilled to have Julie join me this afternoon to share her wisdom about how to keep our plants happy and healthy during very hot and dry Sacramento climate. So Julie, take it away.
All right. Everybody, thank you so much for being here. Sometimes I'm just blown away when people sign up because the little blurb that we send out, it just could look very boring and dry, but it is a fascinating subject. It can be fun and it's necessary. So even though we're talking a lot about conditions in drought, everything that we talk about and how to keep your garden safe, productive during a drought are the exact same skills that you will use when there is no drought. How we water, how we feed, how we identify pests and diseases and weeds and take care of them are all the same things. So what you learn now about Waterwise gardening is what's going to carry you through your whole gardening career. Just as a reminder, I'm an IPM advocate with an organization called Our Water, Our World. And today, this program is brought to you in partnership with the Sacramento Stormwater Quality Partnership. Oh, Suzanne, look at that. The buttons aren't working already. Hold on.
We were having some technical difficulties earlier.
Oh, wait, I've got this.
Okay,
that worked, but now it's going through it at its own speed. We'll be fine. I'm more interesting than this. Here we go. So for the agenda, we're going to be going through some slides for about 45 minutes, and then we're going to be leaving time for your questions at the end. However, I also leave you with my email address at the end, so you can contact me and Suzanne at any time. If you have any ID questions, especially for pests or problems, send us a picture and let us know what the plant is. A lot of problems are extremely host specific, and if we know what plant you're talking about, and for those of you out of my immediate Sacramento area, please let us know what area you're in so that we can tailor a response just to you. We're going to talk about the OWell program. We're going to talk about gardening in California. We're going to focus on how to use water efficiently, tools for conserving water, a lot of great information about the best plant choices for our gardens and tools for protecting our plants, particularly during this very hot season that's coming up. Our Water, Our World is a program. Sorry, these things just go through at their own speed. Our Water, Our World is a program that works with people who sell pesticides and herbicides. And we train them in the products that they have and how to choose the right product, the one that is the least toxic and yet the most effective. That's what our Water, Our World does. We also work with the public, the people who are buying pesticides and herbicides. It turns out when you know what you're looking for, even if you go to a place that has no assistance for you at all, you can still do your shopping and find a product that's going to narrow, focus, and really take care of what's going on. Suzanne's showing you a picture of a little blue tag that we often have in all the stores that we service. And these will have the product name on it and tell you that it is less toxic and more effective. Thank you, Suzanne. Good catch. Integrated pest management. This is a way of looking at our yards and our gardens that is really very large way of looking at it. So for example, if I see one ant, I'm just going to squish the darn thing. If I see a bunch of ants and they're all coming in, I'm going to use IPM because IPM asks me, to find out why those ants are boiling into the house, why they're being such a nuisance outside, and how to get things back under control, because ants are necessary. Ants are wonderful. We need them. They turn the soil, they improve the soil, but when they start coming in and pestering our food supplies, we need to put a stop to it. And before we reach for some product that's actually going to give us pesticide where we make our sandwiches, IPM shows you how to choose the right product and how to stop the problem from happening in the first place. And all of this is using science-based strategies. There is other information out there that works, but if it's not science-based, it has not passed the key test of repeatability. In other words, I can safely access this information, find out something that's going on for you, your area, your slope, your temperature, and tailor a response to make it work for you. Aunt Gladys over in Idaho might have the best dahlias going, but her advice will make almost no difference to me here in Sacramento or anybody anywhere else. So we're going to look at the whole system and we're going to ask if this is a problem, and if it is, can we deal with it? Okay, so a lot of us just went through an aphid infestation, for example. Knowing that brand new plants are just 100% tasty to aphids, knowing that and knowing that your rose bushes are going to get harder, more mature leaves that are no longer so welcoming to aphids, can we deal with a 2-week harassment by spraying them off with the hose and sticking to the right fertilizer and watering appropriately? Not getting a product that's going to take care of everything for a whole year. So there's no accident that down at the very bottom of the slide is chemical controls. That is always the last thing we look at. If you have weeds in your lawn and you go to the hardware store or whatever and you find a product that's going to kill those weeds, but those weeds come back in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, you are using that product again and again and not getting a long-term result. We want you to have that long-term result. So here in California, this is very typical for us. You'll notice that as the temperature rises, the rainfall decreases. This is a recipe for stress. Everything that we put into our gardens, that we put in the spring, is brand new, tender, and tiny. And now we're reaching this time where temperatures are going to be at their highest. There's going to be no assistance from precipitation, and these plants are counting solely on us. And this is where it starts to get rough. Gardening in the summer, in summer dry climates. So how is drought any different? I'll just say it again. Drought is no different in some ways from how we are going to garden always. And we're going to notice this as we go through the program that I talk about where the plant needs water, what kind of fertilizer, if any, how to make sure you watered the whole root zone. These are all things that we want to do whether or not we had a gusher of a rain and we have 20-foot snowpack. However, you're going to see several problems out there, and you're going to be worried that maybe they're a disease, maybe they're an insect pest problem. But a lot of problems can be traced back to how plants react to when it's dry, and how plants react to when it's dry for longer than they like, and how plants react when it's windy and dry. So for example, if you look down at the bottom right-hand corner, you're going to see a veggie plant that's wilting. Remember that this summer, when it's really hot, your plants will be probably wilting a little bit. Before you rush to give them any water, stick your finger in the soil and make sure the soil is dry. Otherwise, these are just plants that are reacting to the heat and protecting themselves as best they can. As the program continues, you're going to notice now with that picture that there's no mulch, crime number 1. There's no drip system, crime number 2. And these are plants that are really at the mercy of temperature. You're also going to see how much when the leaves turn yellow like that, it's kind of like they're covering their little solar panels, right? They're not efficient anymore. They have been impaired, and this can really reduce a plant's vigor. And when the plant's vigor is reduced, you got it. more diseases, more pests are welcomed. So we're going to talk about again and again and again, and I know it might get a little bit boring, but I'll try and be amusing. How you water, how you plant, how you put down mulch is going to make a huge difference. Overall, growing a water efficient garden, you're going to look again, of course, at the water practices, which I'm going to go over several times in several different ways, choosing plants that fit your microclimate. So time and again, when I work in the nursery, I'll have people tell me my neighbor 2 blocks down has the biggest avocado tree you've ever seen. And it's loaded with avocados. And I don't have any. Knowing that your yard, even 2 houses away, could have a different microclimate can explain everything. So a microclimate isn't just a city. It isn't just a change in elevation that's significant. When you buy citrus, for example, we always ask you to look at the microclimate in your yard. Do you have down areas where it's in a little bit of a gully? Cold air is going to sink there and increase the chance of freezing for something like citrus. Do you have something that needs afternoon shade? That's a microclimate. What side of the house are you going to put things on? Creating shade for your house so that your energy bill isn't so high and you're not so miserable. Hydrozoning, we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Hardscape, pathways, rocks, cement, gravel. There's a big difference between all of them. When you look at hardscape, you're increasing the temperature. You're also in danger of decreasing the amount of natural precipitation from reaching your soil. So there's going to be a whole nother slide about permeable surfaces. We're looking for you to use compost and mulch. Mulch is anything that you put on top of the soil to stop the sun from hitting the soil. Literally anything. However, not all mulch is created equal. We really prefer that you use an organic material such as wood chips. The temperature stays down, and I'll go more into that detail also. When you use rocks, it will keep in the water, but it's a really high temperature and it doesn't really do a good job of stopping weeds. Shade cloth is available. AntiTransparents are available. And hydrogels are available. This is especially important, and we'll talk more about this too, for younger plants that you've put in, maybe your fruit trees or new roses that haven't had enough time to develop a large enough canopy to shade that young, tender trunk, especially through our summer. How can we use less water? We're going to learn where a plant needs water and how to find out if you got it down deep enough and why drip is so important. So if you're using a hose, make sure that you've got the attachment on the end that makes the shower. If you simply use the hose without decreasing the pressure of the water that's coming out, you'll find yourself pounding the soil. Up here, we have a lot of clay, and what you're going to find out when you use water at a high pressure is that you get runoff way before you get saturation. Even though you have that rain head attachment on there to get the water at a lower pressure and a lower rate, it is still magnitudes higher in the amount of pressure than natural rainfall. Be patient when you use the hose. Turn it down a little bit. Allow the water to soak in. Turn it off. Check with your finger. Turn it back on. Allow it to soak in time and again until it got as deep as it needs to go. There are all kinds that are out there. All of us have bought dozens in our time. Find the one that you like the best. I'm always in favor of the one with the metal ring because I drop it and it doesn't break. The irrigation system that you may or may not have. So these are timers that are going to set the water working even if you didn't turn it on. This is incredibly important. When it gets this hot, we get nervous to even go to the grocery store for a couple of hours in August. We're afraid that things are going to pass out on us. Usually that's because we made a few iffy choices with how we water and how we fertilize. However, take the pressure off yourself. Go ahead and look at all of these that are available. Know that almost every water provider has massive, and I do mean massive, rebates for switching to a new updated timer. I've seen these rebates be as high as 80%. And I can promise you, whatever you bought in 18 diggity aught, this new thing, you're going to love it. Setting your timer, even if it's drip, for early in the morning is important. And for drip, know you have those black tubes out there. If those are sitting out in the sun and they get hot, the water that comes out of them will be extremely hot. And it will stay hot perhaps until after sunset when it's had a chance to cool down. So even with drip, to avoid adding boiling water to your soil, water early in the day. Direct contact with the soil is important. Mulch is usually about 3 inches deep. Suppose it's wood chips. If you have your water right on top, it first has to get through the mulch before it even begins to saturate the soil. So instead, putting your irrigation under the mulch saves perhaps a half an hour on your drip time and perhaps 1,000 gallons on anything you're using with a sprinkler, because it has to get through that mulch first. So make it easy on yourself and have the irrigation under the mulch to begin with. That saves water and it works better. What do we got here? You've got multiple start and stop times. You've usually got several stations available. So if you have new plants that need to be watered more often, you can have them on one station. You've got mature trees and bushes and landscape that might only need to be watered once a week, even in the summer. That's another station. Please always have a dedicated station for your vegetable garden. You start sometimes with a seed, sometimes you start with a 4-inch pot, but after about a month or two, remember that root zone of that tomato could be 3 or 4 feet deep. The changes that you need to make to the veggie garden and how long and how often you water change quickly. So one separate station for the veggie garden makes a huge difference. As your plants grow, they require water at different spots. And we're going to show you a picture about that. So the main message here is, this is not set it and forget it. If you're getting one of those brand new timers that have the solar sink and they tap into satellites and all this stuff, you still are in charge. Make sure that it's making the right choices. Ooh, there's that arrow. Okay. So for drip, we've got these little irrigation emitters, and those decide how much water per hour is coming out. And you can get a half gallon, 1 per hour, 1 gallon per hour, 2 gallons per hour. And I've seen up to 5 gallons per hour, I think, on the little drippers. On the right-hand side is black tubing that has emitters already in it. So you don't have to fool with this 1/4-inch tubing. You don't have to fool with buying the right emitters. You can lay out this larger tubing, which is typically called 5/8 inch. And it generally has emitters every 12 inches and it lets out water at 1 gallon per hour, which is ideal. Spacing it about every 12 inches is what works. Remember that when water hits the surface, it doesn't go straight down, right? It spreads in this pyramidal fashion, but it has limits to how far it will spread. So if you're using regular traditional emitters, I'd like you to have one every 12 inches. If you're using something where the emitters are already in the larger 5/8 tubing, 12 inches, okay? Let's see what we've got here. Oh, yeah, a picture. All right, this picture is going to explain just about everything that I'm talking about. Where does water go? Where does mulch go? Where are the roots that we're trying to water? So when you first bring home a brand new plant, maybe in a 1 gallon container, you're going to remember where the edge of that pot was. You put the plant in the ground without the pot, and you're going to put those drip emitters exactly where the original pot line was. That way water spreads to the roots that you brought home, those lovely tender new roots, and because it spreads pyramidally, next door. If you have the emitter right in the middle, the water will only spread 12 inches or so, depending on your soil type, which means your roots will only spread 12 inches or so, depending on your soil type. We need to make the soil available with moisture and mulch past the original root zone so the roots can actually spread. So we start at the original pot line. If it's a 24-inch box, you're going to start where that 24-inch box was. You're going to put an emitter every 12 inches, or you're going to use the pre-drilled tubing that has an emitter every 12 inches at that original pot line. Now, after 6 months, all we're ever going to talk about is the drip line. And you can see that hash mark blue on the right-hand side. The drip line is the furthest reaches of your plant material. So if you have a fruit tree, you're going to put your water after 6 months exactly at that drip line. Pretend there is no trunk involved. There is no longer going to be any water at the trunk. Those are not thirsty roots. Thirsty, hungry roots are at that canopy edge. When you think about when it rains in the winter, that first rainfall, you're going to see a lot of water at the tree's edge and past it, and none right underneath the tree. It's dry as a bone. Rainfall naturally collects on those leaves and dumps at that drip edge, the canopy edge, the furthest reaches of the branches. And that is what you are going to recreate for your plants once you have them home. Get the water out there. As a bonus, where the thirsty roots are is exactly the same place where hungry roots are. Do not waste any water, time, money, or fertilizer putting it near the trunk. He doesn't need it there. He needs it at the edge. So drip goes at the drip edge. Now, for all the benefits of mulch, there's one place that it never, ever, 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 ever goes. If mulch's primary job is to keep moisture into the soil, you cannot have mulch right against the base of the plant because you risk holding moisture into the base of the plant, rotting it out. You always need at least 6 inches of clearance around the base of any plant. Fingertip to wrist is a good judge of clear dirt, soil around the trunk, no mulch. Also, when you have mulch right against the base, you have made a covered, secure walkway for every pest to walk unchallenged and unchecked right into your tree. You haven't exposed them to any predatory beneficial insects. So pull that mulch away from the base of any of your plants. Tomatoes, I know, are different. We can bury those. But in general, we need to have that mulch all the way back. One thing about the mulch it says down there is I want it 3 to 5 inches deep. The whole idea is if you have it too thin, the sun is able to snake through and get to the soil. When you have it deep enough to stop the sun from snaking through, 3 to 5 inches is typically ideal. The one thing about this picture I'm not enjoying is it shows the drip line and the mulch. I don't want the mulch to stop at the drip line. I want it to start at least 6 inches from the base of your plant and extend out several feet past the drip line of your plant. We're adding water strategically so that it waters the roots that we have and allows the roots to spread. But if we leave that soil unprotected by mulch, we're drying it out. Also, if we leave that soil without the benefits of mulch on top, the nice biodegradable stuff, we no longer have the earthworms, and the right fungi, the right bacteria, and the right insect world is also not welcomed. So extend that mulch out past the drip line. So the anchor roots are towards the bottom, but all the feeder roots are where? Yeah. At the furthest reaches. You got it. All right. When you bring home that baby new plant, you brought it home in that cute little 4-inch pot, and that 4-inch pot, sometimes we forget that pot is the limit of that root zone. That's all it has. So this is a beginner plant. It's cute. It's got a lot of greenery. We think it looks healthy, and it does. However, if we don't water originally at the first pot line and then further at the canopy edge, even for tomatoes, even for beans, even for melons, we're keeping that original root zone that size. If as time goes by, we don't water past that root zone in depth and past that initial root zone in width, we deny that plant the chance to become healthy and independent, and it becomes whiny and needy and wants water every 10 minutes, and it's a mess, and we've got a $50 tomato on our hands. You're going to grow your tomatoes, you're going to grow your roses, you're going to grow your trees so that you have developed a root zone that is 2 to 3 to 4 times wider than what you brought home, 2 to 3 to 4 times deeper than what you brought home. That's a plant that becomes drought tolerant. And that's exactly what we want, whether or not we had 20 inches of rain or 5 inches of rain, whether we have 50 feet snowpack or 1 foot of snowpack, we're going to do the exact same things. What tends to happen is that we water shallowly, which means we're not encouraging that root zone to develop, right? How do you know? So this is one of those sayings that a lot of us say, and I'd rather we never said it again. Water deeply, but not too often. When you think about watering deeply and not too often, you might find that you're at a loss to actually define that. You brought home a 4-inch pot. Watering deeply means you water that 4-inch pot plus 1 inch below. You brought home a 24-inch box. That means you water that 24-inch box depth plus 1 inch below. Then you never water again till you stick your finger in the soil and you find out that it got dry a few inches. But we guess. We go ahead and we turn on the irrigation, especially if it's drip, and we turn it on for 10 minutes. Sprinklers get turned on for 10 minutes because they put out gallons in a minute. Drip runs in terms of hours because it takes a whole hour to get that whole gallon of water. So if you're watering short, your root zone is short, you've sacrificed fruits, you've sacrificed flowers, the plant is crummy, and it does indeed pass out when you leave the house for 20 minutes. So how much water do my plants need? So when you go to the nursery, you're going to see all those terms on all the tags saying low water, medium water, high water, or NWOE, no water once established. What we're seeing though is that people are doing a really good job of buying drought tolerant plants, buying Mediterranean style plants, but because they're not watering correctly, they're not creating a drought tolerant plant. If you cannot grow the plant's root zone, you are not growing something that can take care of itself. Further, it can take 2, 3, and occasionally 4 years of progressive watering to make that plant be drought tolerant, because you came home with that tiny root zone, but you're going to develop a big fat one. So if you found out that your root zone is that you need to water down 12 inches, even if it's a drought tolerant plant and it's established, not NWOE, but low water, you're always going to water down that entire 12 inches every time. What's different is at first, you're only going to let this amount of soil get dry before you water it again. As it gets more mature, you're going to let it get this dry before you water it again. And sometimes you're going to let it get almost completely dry before you water it again. And some plants really do mean it when they say once established, no water in the summer. So when you do a good job of buying those plants, know that you've taken on a 2 to 3 year commitment of watering deeper and wider as time goes by, and progressively less often, but never shorter. The whole root zone needs to be watered. Here in the Sacramento region, we do have a smart irrigation scheduler. There's also one through UCIPM, but that one's a little more complicated because they ask a lot more questions. This one is a lot easier and more to the point. So it's going to help you decide. That's the bottom line though, help. If you don't use your finger and put it in the soil and find out when it's dry enough to water again, if you don't use a water meter, a moisture meter, a probe to put in the soil to find out that you watered the whole distance, you're guessing. Because one thing this site does not have is whether or not you have a slope, is whether or not you live in Rockland or Granite Bay where it's all rocks with a little bit of clay mixed in, or you live where I live where it's just all clay. These things don't take that into account. So this is going to help you, but you make the final decision. So how long? It depends, right? So we just talked about whether your plant is brand new and has a tiny immature root zone and needs watering more often, or it's established and needs watering less often. So let's pause right there for a moment. So a lot of us are bringing home new plants and adding them to our established gardens. This can be a problem. If you've made a drought tolerant yard where it needs to get this dry before you water again, and you add her a little 4-inch guy who needs water all the time, you might not be successful. More to the point, your plants might not be successful. Once you have a section of your yard that's established, adding new plants can be tricky. Maybe what's a good idea is to put them in a 5-gallon pot, raise them separately in a nursery until they're drought tolerant, and then put them in with the big boys. How established a plant is. Young plants need water more frequently. See, I skipped ahead. The texture of your soil, clay versus sandy loam. All right, so you remember when I said water hits the soil, it spreads subsurface in this pyramidal fashion? What we know is that the more clay you have in your soil, the tighter it fits together. Further, it spreads even wider. With clay soil, you can get away with one emitter every 16 inches as opposed to 12. When you have sandy soil, the water shoots straight down. Now you might have 12-inch spacing on your emitters, but it's only going to water right here, leaving this soil without any moisture. So the biggest problem is when you have clay, you're going to add a little bit of compost, as little as 5% to mix it in at the very beginning of when you're gardening. And by that, I mean year 1. You can till year 1. After that, you're just going to lay some compost on top. And that's going to fix the clay enough that it starts to hold water responsibly and let water out responsibly. When you have sandy loam or you have sandy soil or heavily rock soil, just those big boulders and river rocks that a lot of us have, you're going to add some compost and you're going to add mulch to the top, which starts to improve the soil for you. Year after year after year, it gets better when you stick to organic, stick to drip, and add mulch. You can start to sit out there and enjoy your yard instead of fussing with it every 20 minutes. Make sure that there's that mulch on the soil because you just added 10 gallons of water to your soil, for example. It's going to stay in there longer and be accessible to your plants longer if you have mulch on the surface. Up to 70% is what the university is saying. So you spent a gallon and now you're going to keep at least 70% of that gallon in the ground longer. This is key. Now, a lot of people think clay is no good and they should dig it up and get rid of it. But without clay, if you have just stuff that you bought out of a bag, the water is going to race through. So think about last summer's veggie garden. Did you put your finger in the soil and you found out it was dry every day? That's soil that does not have enough organic matter in it to hold the water. You overbought. You bought something too glorious, too glamorous, and it's not doing a good job. You got to junk it back up, get some native soil back in there. If that's not possible, add the mulch and the compost to the top. Remembering about the microclimates of your garden. So for example, around here, what we do is we plant our tomatoes so that they're facing the harsh setting sun. So that 4, 5, 6 o'clock sun that's just so brutal. And we put our basil maybe on the other side. So the tomato is actually shading the basil from that harsh summer sun. So microclimates isn't just something in a book. It's actually front yard by front yard, backyard by backyard, section of the backyard by section of the backyard. How do you know if you are overwatering or underwatering? So in the nurseries, a lot of times people will come in, say their plant isn't doing well, and I'll ask, how are you watering? And they'll say drip, and it gets plenty of water. And I'll say, that's great. Tell me how long and how often you're leaving the water on for. And that's when I usually find out they've got their drip on for 10 minutes, twice a day, 7 days a week, which tells me they're watering this deep and it's soggy all the time. Plants don't like that. And it's just no good. We've got to water deeper. So you've got that moisture probe, you know, with the little sensor down at the bottom, and you found out that you watered your 12 inches. But here's the best tool that I've ever used. Here's your soil. Stick your finger in it. If it's dry, water it. And I mean dry. If it's a little bit moist, he's still fully saturated down here and doesn't need you. We're looking for dry. This is particularly important for those of us who grow citrus. Citrus is famous for acting up and being a total brat. If the soil is moist all the time, the leaves will turn yellow and he'll drop his leaves and you panic. That is the same behavior citrus does, by the way, when you don't water enough. So we're going to water deeply, which means that whole root zone. So you're going to do a little bit of research, find out how deep your root zone is, and make sure you watered that. The key thing that's nice about drip is even though it can take 8 hours to let 8 gallons of water come out, you might only need to water once a week, even in August when it's been 110 degrees for a week and a half, because you watered deeply enough that the roots can actually take care of the plant itself. So use the probe to find out if you went the 12 to 16 inches when you did your research to find out how deep that root zone is. Use this tool to make sure the soil got dry before you watered again. What can we do right now? We can use tools to conserve moisture. Compost. You're going to put compost on the surface. It's going to feed the soil because it invites the right fungi, the right bacteria, and the right insect world, just like regular mulch does, the wood chips. And that soil that starts to handle its own business. So once a year, you put down fresh compost. Once a year, you check on your mulch. If it got skinny, I need you to bulk it back up and add some more. Jim, could you help me with the cat that's behind me?
I absolutely can.
Then mulch. I'm looking for wood chips. There's always that talk about organic and not organic. I'm skipping that conversation for now. What I'm looking for is something that's going to break down. Now, this can make you nuts, right? Julie's telling me to spend good money on mulch, put it out there and expect it to go away, and I have to add more. Yes, we have done such a fabulous job of keeping our yards and gardens free of every last leaf and bit of plant material that the soil has not been fed. This is why I spend the majority of my time talking about the benefits of adding compost and mulch. Put this food source down and your soil starts to get better immediately. If your soil got very dry, it becomes hydrophobic. You'll see this a lot in potted plants, by the way, where the water just sinks down out the side and never soaks in. And when soil gets that dry, it's almost impossible to bring it back to life. You have to scratch in compost. You have to do all kinds of things. This is also why adding drip is really important because it is slow. Drip is just drops of water. Adding the mulch on top keeps your water in longer, invites all the right guys to work your soil for you, helps with water infiltration, and reduces water evaporation. Also, it moderates the surface soil temperature, not so much underneath past an inch down, but the surface. So if you have just naked dirt out there and no mulch covering it, it becomes 90 degrees at the surface. Your plants don't like it. Your soil doesn't like it. Adding the mulch, everybody's feeling a lot better. And as a reminder, mulch never goes against the trunk of the plant. Organic fertilizers. If you're using synthetic fertilizers, what you're getting usually is an excessive amount of nitrogen. And that causes a lot of rapid growth. When you have rapid, brand new, tender green growth, and didn't allow that plant's material to harden off before you fed it again with some more synthetics, now you have aphids 27 months out of the year. Now you have mealybugs, now you have ants, it's just obnoxious. Sticking to organic, and the prices become extremely competitive. When you add organic fertilizers, you're putting out into the soil everything that the plant needs. And the plant is responsible at this buffet, pulls out what it needs when it needs it. This is why when you read the instructions, for example, the EB Stone for the veggie gardens, it will say put in every 4, 5, or 6 weeks. If you look at the synthetic, it'll say every 7 to 10 days. And it's a rocket ride with synthetics. It's pushing a bunch of green growth, and then he's coming down. So he looks great, he looks sad, looks great, looks sad every 7 to 10 days. But when you use organic, this rocket ride doesn't happen. It's regular, sustained food. Further, the synthetics tend to have a lot of salt in them. I'm not clear why, but they do. As we all know, plants don't enjoy a lot of salt. You start seeing toxic levels in the leaves. A certain pattern to the yellowing will be evident, not just regular yellowing, but a little bit of brown and then a little bit of yellow, and then this kind of, it's distinctive. Switch your plants over to organic. You get to feed a lot less often. And when you use synthetics in the nursery, this always happened. It's August and people come to me and they tell me that they've never seen a better tomato plant, 18 feet high, 27 feet wide. The thing's gorgeous, but it has 3 tomatoes. When you use synthetic, it's all nitrogen and it forces top green growth and ignores root growth, roots, and flowers. So roots, fruits, and flowers are ignored. You got what you demanded when you put in a synthetic. So choosing organic goes a long way towards success. Check on your sprinkler system, check on your drip system, make sure there's no leaks, no breaks. I love lawn, and enough, people. We can't have 2,000, 4,000 square feet of lawn. We need to have a reduced lawn area. And if your trees have become mature, your lawn's not doing well anyway, it's coming all patchy and weird, look again to your water provider to find out what rebates they have for taking out your lawn and paying for something else. What are the best plants to grow? All right, Suzanne, I got you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the best plants that we want to grow, slide please.
Yep. Got it.
We want to grow natives. We want to choose drought tolerant California natives or Mediterranean natives that are going to adapt to our climate. We're looking at climate appropriate plants. So what we're talking about are plants that are going to be best in our climate. So the plants in my garden here in Sonoma County are going to be a little different than the plants that Julie will be growing in her Sacramento County. So we really want to adapt, choose plants that are going to be climate appropriate for our region, our specific little microclimate where we live. The next thing is that we want to understand that planting the right plant in the right place is going to be more water efficient. It's also going to allow plants to be more drought tolerant and will be less desirable to pests. And the reason why is, and this really also speaks to space. So understanding the maximum size of the plant and making sure we're giving it enough room to grow, because if we're trimming it all the time, we're going to be encouraging a lot of new growth that is going to be very desirable to pests, but also we're putting that plant under stress again. So what we're trying to achieve here is to reduce the stress on the plant so that when there are times of excessive heat or times of extended dry, that those plants can actually get through with ease. All right, next slide. And when it comes to next slide, please. When it comes to California natives, I just want to share that, you know, they're beautiful. Okay. There are so many gorgeous plants that are going to be climate appropriate and regionally appropriate for our gardens. I can also share that when we choose California natives, they also provide higher nutrition to the ecology of our garden, including beneficial insects and pollinators, as well as birds and all the other critters that like to join our garden. Some nice suggestions if we are looking just to add a few climate appropriate, introduce a few more climate appropriate plants, some perennials, such as some of the ones on the screen. We're looking at yarrow, salvias, penstemon, lavenders, and then for shrubs, we're looking at ribes, ceanothus. If we're looking for a ground cover, something that we can even walk on lightly, we're looking at diamondia or even thyme. Creeping thyme is one of my most favorite. Well, diamondia is too, because it has these beautiful yellow flowers. But if we're looking to replace that lawn, but we really like the look of the lawn, then a couple really fantastic choices would be our native bent grass. Also a variety of buffalo grass, that's the UC Verde buffalo grass. And then a new grass that's on the market that I'm just starting to hear about that's extremely drought tough is Kurapia, Kurapia. I love it. So those are some really great options. All right, next slide, please. And then from there, I just wanted to introduce you to a couple really cool resources. The Woolco's resource, which is really going to break down. It's very beefy. You'd go in there, just make sure you've got some time to cruise through. There's a lot of content, but it's going to show you or map out the plants that are going to work well for your area, as well as how much water they will need once established, how deep we need to get that water around the root zones, everything that Julie was just talking about. That's going to be on the Woolco's website. And then Calscape is one of my favorite. I go to Calscape and I just type in my zip code, and all the beautiful plants that grow perfectly well in my zip code come up, and they're going to be allocated by trees, perennials, shrubs, ground covers, and so forth. And then of course the Cal Native Plant Society, which is actually in conjunction with Calscape, is going to have more resources, as well as your local Master Gardener website. Next slide, please. And then for those of you that like to grow food, like myself, we are going to choose heirloom varieties. Heirloom varieties are going to be ideal for our climate. Most heirlooms are going to come from other Mediterranean drought tolerant regions, and heirloom varieties have a tendency to really grow deep roots. Those roots are deep divers, and when we have deeply grown root systems, they can access water much deeper down, and we will not need to water as frequently. And then understand that if we have the choice between growing in a raised bed and or containers versus growing into the open ground, growing in a raised bed and containers is going to require less water. They're actually containing the water in that little zone. And something that we just like to share is the concept of hydrozoning. So it's really grouping plants together with the same irrigation needs. So same watering needs are going to go within the same zone, so they can all get watered in the same fashion. But if you've got an established garden bed and you just want to fill in a couple spots with some new plants, as Julie mentioned before, we are not changing the irrigation to accommodate that new plant. We are going to keep the irrigation to accommodate what's existing, but then we're going to hand water. We're going to spot water and just encourage that plant and coax that plant along until it becomes established. We also want to consider all the microclimate needs of your garden and always plant plants that require or share those same microclimate needs so they can all thrive. All right.
Very nice. Oh, hang on. It's making me work hard. Hang on. Oh, now it works. All right, so recycle and reuse. There are a lot of sites out there now that can help you with this. The one that we're really enjoying a lot is Gray Water Action, the one that we've cited down here. They have a lot of information on how to recycle, reuse, save water, and this new laundry to landscape gray water system. So those of us that have been experiencing droughts, since the 60s, remember all of this from the last couple of times. It's back and it's better. So there are all kinds of ways out there to recycle and reuse and keep water on site. This is important because even if the drought ends, we want to water and feed the way we are now because that's the way plants like it, not just because there's a paucity of water. Rainwater is something that's also something that you can catch, pervious surfaces so the water can sink in. As a reminder, even though we're talking about natives and Mediterraneans, if there's fire danger where you are, you're going to pay particular attention to whether or not these plants are oily. And you'll have shorter plants next to the house and taller plants further and further away. So keep the rain on site. Why? You need it. Number two, if you don't, everything that you added to your yard, all the fertilizers, chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, escape your yard and leave and cause problems downstream. There are now huge improvements in capturing rainwater. Consider that the average roof might be 1,000 square feet. This is over 600 gallons of water that is now accessible to you on demand. And the rebates for rain barrels are, I think, statewide now. So again, check with your water provider. Look at the natural slope of your yard, create a slope of your yard, and keep the water where you want it. And that works beautifully. Instead of cement slabs, I know it's tempting, consider something else. That's crushed granite, that's decomposed granite, anything where the water can actually go through. Look at that bottom right-hand picture, and on the left-hand side, you can see a raised wood barrier. Even though the plant is technically staying in that raised bed, guess what isn't staying in that raised bed? The root zone. It has extended past that raised bed, and now you've allowed it to get natural water when it happens. AntiTransparents, these are things that we spray on our plants to slow down the rate of transpiration. Because when it's windy, when it's hot, when leaves are tender, they burn and crisp. A few leaves being hurt this way is not a big deal. However, if the plant is really suffering, we had winds for 2 hours and it was 110, maybe it's all the leaves that got hurt. Using your shade screen strategically placed to protect your plants from drying out rapidly in high winds, knowing about things like wilt stop and cloud cover and how that can help you. There are also these products down here that can help smaller pots keep the water in a lot longer. Shade screen. So one thing that's really important about the shade screen that you're seeing here is that it is very far away from the plants itself. In the winter, we cover plants closely to hold in the heat. If you do that in the summer, you've made the problem worse. The shade screen is high, way away from the plants, allowing for a lot of airflow, a lot of coolness, and the shade screen is strategically placed so that the plant gets a break from that harsh setting sun. Monitor for pests. You're out there, you're going to spend 5 minutes a day looking for a weed, pulling it up, looking at some leaves that look kind of funky, sending us an email with a question so we can help you figure out what it is. And pulling off occasionally the worst of the leaves, and then just looking at the new leaves to see if those look good. Weeds do compete a lot with your plants for water and resources, so keeping those weeds down is important. Oh, well, that's not going to work. Hold on, let me try this thing here, previous. Hey, okay, it didn't want to. There are all kinds of resources that we sent out to you earlier. Please feel free to look at them, but I give you a loving caution. Try not to get lost in them. You can go down a lot of rabbit holes. Do some research, ask some questions, take advantage of your master gardeners, take advantage of us. Ask us what might be going on and we can help. put out something for the bees. These are little bowls with some rocks in them so the bees don't just sit in the water and they can lap up the water. Thank you so much for joining, you guys. Oh, wow, we just made it. I want to
Vicky
remind you.
Gonzalez, yeah.
I want to remind you that we're having